Hey, it's good to see you again. How are you? I've missed you. Why don't you come on over here? We can talk a bit more. So tell me, my friend, how have you been? Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that. This world can feel so rough sometimes. I'm glad you're here, though. I'm glad that we get to have this moment to visit and to catch up a bit. You know, some of the things I used to struggle with, I still do sometimes. Like, this isn't a solved issue, but, well, it sounds like you're having some problems too, so maybe some of my solutions might be relevant. So, would you like to hear a little bit of a story about my life? Yeah? Okay. Let's go ahead and get comfortable. There we go. So, when was this? That was some years ago. I was in a not great space in my life. I was having all sorts of problems with my job, my relationships, both romantic and just friends. It seemed like everything was just at its wit's end. And I couldn't seem to figure out why. It would seem to always be just a little bit outside of my grasp. Now, there's a bit more context here that's relevant. You see, when I was a child, I was much, much, much younger than I am now. I was diagnosed with ADHD. Now, this was way back when. This was when ADHD was still a relatively new concept. And so it wasn't as well understood. There wasn't quite the same nuance that exists now. You could either be autistic, or you could be ADHD, you couldn't be both. There was all sorts of other limitations as well. The neurotypes weren't as well understood, things like that. And, well, I was diagnosed at the time with what's now known as the inattentive type. Inattentive type of ADHD. And at the time, they just called it ADD. And I got medication, but the medication I was on at the time wasn't a good fit. And eventually I worked really hard to get off from that medication. I was like, No, I don't like all the side effects that I'm getting, so I'm just going to just try and go at my own, go do my own thing. So that's what I did. And I got off from medication sometime about 15 or 20. No, it wasn't 20, it was like 15 or 16, excuse me. Anyway, so here I am. I am very definitely neurodivergent in some form or fashion. And I'm freshly adult, and I'm going to make my mark in the world. I'm going to do it without medication, and you know what? I did my fair share without that. And well, I found out later on in life, much later on, like we're talking nearly, oh gosh, what would it be? 20 some odd years later? Really long time. I found out a long time later that I had basically been going about it the hard way. Like, also, I want to be very clear, this is not me saying you should go with one medical decision or another. Obviously, talk to your doctors, right? But at least from my own experience, I found out that, it is possible as a person with ADHD to survive the world without medication. But I also learned that it makes things so much harder than it needs to be. Like, holy cow, let me tell you, it did not need to be that hard. Not even close. Oh, friend. Anyway, I also found out later on in life that I am definitely autistic. Which, given that I'm a furry on the internet, is perhaps not that surprising that I fell into some sort of neurodivergent camp, right? Seems there's lots of us. But that all said, something that I also learned, and this was something I kind of pieced together myself to a certain degree, certain parts of it was also explained to me by others, is that there's all these unexplained rules in life. There is, let's see, what are some of them? We've got explicit communication versus implicit communication, which is like, if you read into it a little bit, you can figure it out. But it basically is the things that you are stating at face value. That's the explicit communication, right? And then you've got your implicit communication. Now, your implicit communication, implicit communication, that's going to be the things that are implied. Those things that you have to read between the lines on, that you have to infer. Something that's really similar to this that I did not know about for the longest time is something that was explained to me as guess culture and ask culture. Now, there are people who have done way better than me talking about those, but ask culture, that's going to be like, let's say your friend has a can of Pepsi, right, in the fridge, and you're like, you really want to have some of that Pepsi, and you're just like, and you want to know how to ask your friend, can I have some Pepsi? In guest culture, you're supposed to say something like, oh, that's such a cool can of Pepsi that you've got in your fridge. I really wish I had a can of Pepsi. And in guest culture, your host is supposed to read between the lines of what you're saying. You're implying, oh, I would like to have a can of Pepsi, please. In reality, if you came from a background in which you didn't do a lot of implied communication, like such as my neurodivergent butt, or you just happen to be raised in an environment that's very ask culture heavy, well, at that point, you would go, oh, can I have this can of Pepsi? And the thing is, in guest culture, if you explicitly ask for something, you're only supposed to ask for things that you know that the person is going to say yes to. If you ask for something that the person isn't necessarily going to say yes to, it can make it very awkward and uncomfortable, because then they feel obligated to say yes, even if they don't want to say yes, or that they don't feel like they can say yes. They now are obligated to, under the rules of being a good host. And it's taken me years, and I'm not saying I'm done. I'm still early on in this, relatively speaking. I'm probably a decade in on learning about this specifically, but it's still a lot of practice, you know? Anyway, where was I? All right, nearly a decade in, and I still have my moments of guessing and figuring out when is the right time. But when I finally started wrapping my head around it, it made such a huge difference for my interactions with neurotypicals, with people who, or also known as allistics, people who are not autistic, who don't struggle with these things, who, or just came from different cultures. And oh gosh, so there was another form of this that I found out recently, in which certain people, so people raised in like countries where, you know, eye reading is very important, you know, maybe some of the Asian countries like Japan, or, you know, maybe Thailand or others. Some of the autistic folk there really struggle with reading that, and they prefer to see lower face expressions. The interesting thing is that many of the people that I know from the, like, North America who are autistic, many of them tend to prefer expression of the eye reading. And obviously everyone's different. You meet one person with autism, one person with ADHD, you've met one person with autism or ADHD. Like, there's so much variation. There's so much difference between each person. But it was a really interesting pattern I noticed. And so now I wonder, you know, if does it something to do with the environment in which we're raised, where we just get used to certain types of expressions, or for that matter, our sensory processing just assumes or processes it some way, and then when we're exposed to different cultures, we're able to read those more natively. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just rambling at this point, but main point is where I was going with all of this is that each culture seems to have different rules of what's considered appropriate for how to read explicit or implicit communication, of whether or not it's a guess culture or an ask culture. And oftentimes there will be even sub-regional. So you've got your country, you've got your region, and then you've got like smaller sections, like maybe a city, or groups within a city. Like each of those are going to have different approaches. Maybe not entirely different, but like at least variations on the concept. And when I started to figure that out, that's made a huge difference with my ability to navigate those spaces, because then I could start actively looking for those. And that's when my pattern recognition really started to come in handy, where like it's like, oh, that's what's going on here. That's what's going on with these rules. Like, I'm not a very good person with eye contact, for example. And like, I know some people here. Right now I'm in Bangkok, by the way. I'm traveling around in the Asian Pacific, but like, I know that there are people who really struggle with the lack of eye contact. And I find it so fascinating, the differences of preferences and needs and so many other things. Anyway, thank you for listening to my bit of a ramble story and listening to my thoughts on the differences of implicit and explicit culture and communication, so many other things. Gosh, we're kind of out of time at the moment, but I had all sorts of other thoughts to share with you too about the specifics of body language as well and the nuances around that, but I guess that's going to have to be another video. Either way, I'm so glad that you're here and spending this time with me. And I look forward to sharing more stories with you. Lately, there's been a lot more of you dropping by to say hello, and I just want you to know that I am so grateful that you are considering this a safe space, a space where you can relax and get a bit of comfort. I hope that it continues to be the right space for you. As always, if you enjoyed this, give it a like, a subscribe, maybe give it a share or a comment. Every little bit helps right now as I'm growing the channel, and just know that I'm thinking of you and that I care so very, very much. Alright, my friend, I'm going to get heading off, but if you want to see some more videos, you can see them over there, and I'll see you next time. Mwah. Take care.